Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm Catherine Corelli. Ime Caterina Corelli, καλώς ήρθες στο κανάλι μου. Today I'm painting a larger painting. It's 30 by 30 inches. And this is the opening scene from the Journey of Oia. Oia is spelled O-I-A. So this is the very first scene when she's still a kid. And I'm setting this somewhere in the wild, in the mountains. It's out in the wilderness, basically, for the most part. And I think it's quite a fantastical landscape. Now, before we dive in, consider subscribing to my channel and hit all bell notifications. Enable all notifications, not hit all bell notifications, damn it. And check out my content. And if you like my content, consider becoming a member. You can join, and there are perks and special content for members only. Plus, on top of that, members have exclusive discounts for my original oil paintings. And members have a special pass and are prioritized for commissions. That's how it works. So I'm starting from the back, from the sky, and for this painting I browsed through a whole lot of mountain photography up in the mountains at different times of day, different weather conditions, and I mean real photographs, not AI generated stuff, because the last thing I wanted to have is to form an opinion on the mountains based on AI. And there are some really cool photographers, and it actually got me thinking about, if you're actually somewhere up in the mountains and you're a photographer, you kind of have to set everything up. And if you're doing night photography, then it's probably going to be freezing cold by the time you're going to be taking those pictures. And damn it, that's quite a challenge. So I looked at all of those references, and then I set them all aside and I started painting from imagination. So this entire painting is painted from imagination only. There are no solid references. I'm not copying anything. I'm just making everything up. The idea is that Oia remembers herself being a kid, sitting on the edge of a huge, massive pit in the ground, somewhere in the mountains. And as she looks down that pit, she notices a serpent in that pit. And it's kind of a fantastical setup, and there's a full moon, but also it's getting closer and closer to the morning, so the sun starts to rise, and it starts to hit the highest peaks. There's that mountain summit in the back, which I have to say I've drawn inspiration for that mountain summit from Tibet and from the Altai mountains. It's a really tall summit. And the sun starts to hit those peaks, those snowy peaks, but the moonlight still shines down here into this huge valley. Well, it's not really a valley. There's a multitude of valleys here between these mountains. They're not snowy mountains, but they're still very tall. And there I have Donald on my shoulder. He really wanted some attention, so I picked him up and I'm holding him. So the moon is still shining. It's full moon. There's Donald. And at the same time, the sun is about to start rising. It kind of already starts to show, and the tallest peaks, they catch the first rays of sunlight. So in just a little bit, this is going to be morning. But it's not morning yet. The moonshine is still there. And Oia sits on these rocks, her being a little child. And there's this vast landscape behind her. There's a really, really deep abyss underneath. And she's sitting on this edge of this pit, of this huge pit, on these rocks. And that's why we see her so closely. And she's watching the serpent. So here I'm working on the snow peaks, which are getting golden gradually. And the moonlight, I don't really know. I mean, I don't really know how accurate this is from a, what's the term? How realistic this is. Is there such a combination when you have the moon that is so high and a moon that illuminates so much below, and at the same time there's sunrise already? So it, according to my painting, I have the sun that simultaneously shines on the highest peaks and simultaneously hits the moon, and then the reflected light from the moon shines back here, but we don't see the sun yet. I don't know how realistic this is, and is it possible in reality? I know that there's a whole multitude of combinations, and probably people who are knowledgeable on this topic, they probably know it. I definitely know that there's a whole lot of things that are possible because I've observed so many full moons here in Kentucky and stars, because here you don't have the light pollution as is usually present over large cities. So here I can observe the morning star, I can see the Southern Cross, I can see the full moon, and even when it's not full moon, I can still see it. And I do observe this kind of phenomenon over here, but not exactly this one. So I don't have snowy peaks here, so I just don't know if this is realistic. But then on the other hand, this whole landscape is made up. So does it even matter if this is realistic or no? And the Journey of Oia, after all, is a fantasy story. It's not a real life story. It's not set in a real location. So I don't know if this even matters. It probably doesn't. I also have to say that since it's a large painting, you can see that there is some glare left on the sky, but because I started with the sky and then I started moving down, 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 the sky is basically dry already. The paint dried. It took me a while to paint this painting. Several days. So while I was working on other elements and kind of left the sky alone, it started to dry. Which posed a problem a little further down the road because oil colors, they don't dry at an equal rate, at an equal speed. They dry at different speeds, depending on the pigment, depending on the oil content, and such. And so the problem here is that if it's a large painting and you get far enough, then you have to stop and you have to oil out the whole painting so that you don't lose a sense of values, like what's going on in the darks, what's going on in the lights, and And here I'm starting to run into this problem gradually. You see, now the mountains dried already. And so there's basically no glare. There is some glare, but this is from Prussian blue. It's kind of more, it has more of a shine to it as compared to cobalt blue by Utrecht and brilliant blue, which I also used. And brilliant blue by Utrecht. Anyways, the Prussian blue is glossier somehow. Maybe there's just more oil in it. Even though I have to say that usually in my initial stages, in the lower layers I paint, I add a lot more oil, and I kind of dilute the paint with oil. So it ends up overall pretty glossy, the whole painting. But, like I said, drying times are different. I was using also some THANX in purple in some places, and I've noticed that THANX in purple doesn't dry with the same rate. Another thing that I've noticed is that THANX in purple, when it dries, and if mixed with other colors, it forms little droplets. I mean, when you try to put oil on top, it starts to form droplets. And the same thing happens when you varnish an oil painting. I don't know if this is the quality of the pigment, if this is specifically the quality of dioxazine purple coming from Utrecht. Is it the same with other oil colors? My understanding is this has to do either with the pigments or it has to do with binders. At this point, I'm really starting to run into trouble because I'm painting that bottom right corner, but my overall sense of values in the painting is kind of getting off already. And there's Tigric, there's Dean. He likes to climb up on my back, and I really tried to paint for a little while with him on my back, but it is impossible because he's too heavy and I can't really stand straight. So here I'm oiling out the painting, so all it is I'm just using a clean brush, and I'm covering the entire painting with a thin layer of oil, with a thin coat of oil, because I really have to understand here what is going on with the depth of colors and how do my values stack up. And after that, I switch over to the fine details because there's a castle on one of those mountains, and then there is a town underneath that mountain. And you can see the reflection now in the painting because it's just oiled out. There's another little town. And there's some fields and forests, and all of that is there in the back. It's across from here, from where E is. She's sitting on the closest edge of this abyss. And all of that, all those fields and everything is on the farther edge. So this is what this landscape looks like. There's the castle on top. There is the town underneath that mountain. Here's the forest that begins in the pit and the serpent. And there's a small town. Yep, and there's the whole summit. And that's the painting. Thank you very much for being with me, and until next time. Ciao.